What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, you read the title, you know what time it is. In today's video, we are going to be going over 3 wide receivers that are as safe as they come. When it comes to safety in fantasy football, there are many factors playing into it. Not every player is going to come into the season with the same chance of risk of injury. Other players may be on an offense that simply doesn't have enough offensive production to go around, thus increasing their week-to-week volatility. And some players may find themselves on a team where there's a lot of competition for targets. When taking into consideration all of those risk factors, it almost seems like finding a safe player is more difficult than not. No need to worry though, we got your back. In today's video, we'll be going over 3 wide receivers, and each player when compared to their peers present an extremely low risk rating. We all know the importance of hitting on our early round draft picks, and while none of these players are going to be first round picks because I did want you to have an opportunity to target them in drafts, shockingly enough, these players are still coming in at pretty good values. Before we do get into the video though, as per usual, a bit of housekeeping. Guys, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I don't know what you're thinking. Nearly 60% of you that watch our videos regularly are actually not subscribed. With us now being in the month of June, let's see if we can get that number closer to 50% by the end of the month. I'll keep you updated on that, but in the meantime, if you guys do enjoy the content, please don't hesitate to hit that like button. That lets us know that you do enjoy this type of content and want to see more videos like this in the future. With that being said, let's hop over to the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which wide receiver to post at least 1,000 receiving yards last season finished with the fewest fantasy points in a PPR scoring format. The correct answer was actually Robbie Anderson. Congratulations to Sawyer Hebbs, who completely killed this one, being the first to get it right on both YouTube and Twitter. Certainly well on your way to making it into the Hall of Fame. As for today's stat of the day, in 2020, there were 3 teams to tie for first place when it came to 4th down conversions in 2020. Let us know in the comment section which teams those are. Once again, that's which 3 teams finished the season with a league-leading 4th down conversions with 17. Without further ado though, let's hop right into the video, and as per usual, we'll start with the player on the thumbnail, none other than Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How fitting is it that Mike Evans is going to be leading this list of safe wide receivers? Mike Evans throughout the years has had a few different quarterbacks throwing him the ball, each season also dealing with various levels of success offensively. Despite his adversity though, Mike Evans is the first player in NFL history to begin his career with 7 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. You heard that right, 7 consecutive seasons. No other player in NFL history has been able to accomplish that feat. We all know exactly how talented the wide receiver position has been in the NFL throughout the years. So for Mike Evans to secure himself a spot in the NFL record books, a spot that he is the lone receiver in NFL history to be able to accomplish this feat, it's really just a testament to how special Mike Evans truly is. Unfortunately though, we can't exchange NFL records for fantasy points each week. So when determining Mike Evans' value for this upcoming season, we are going to factor in his safety, but of course a large portion of his value is all coming down to this season. Past production is not indicative of future results, but if it were, Mike Evans would be going to the moon. As for projecting out his 2020 production, this year should be easier than ever considering a lot of the pieces in the offense last season are going to be returning for 2021. Whenever an offense is dealing with a lot of moving parts, whether that be a quarterback change, an influx of talented wide receivers, or an exit of talented wide receivers, the more factors that are inconsistent with what we had offensively the season before, the more difficult it is to project out what his production's going to be. But thankfully with Mike Evans, we do have a 7-season sample going over the peaks and valleys of his production, aka his ceiling and his floor. And considering the fact that Tom Brady is going to be returning for the 2021 season, the most important player on this offense for Mike Evans' production, and this was an area that was a big concern for many people heading into last year's draft. Obviously with Tom Brady being released from New England, we did have to wonder a bit if his production was going to taper off along with it. And even with Tom Brady being one of the better and more efficient quarterbacks in the entire league throughout his 21-year career, betting against Tom Brady is never a smart bet to take, but these were still very valid concerns. Tom Brady in his last season with New England was posting some of his worst numbers of his career. Many people quick to chop up age as a contributing factor, and with New England feeling comfortable with letting go of Tom Brady, a team that he had built a dynasty with, a team that we never thought we would see him wear another uniform, and with Belichick feeling comfortable enough to let him go, many people had to wonder if the production we saw in 2019 was going to be more in line with what we could expect for 2020, but Tom Brady doing Tom Brady things completely flipped that narrative on its head. Tom Brady in his first year in Tampa Bay threw for over 40 touchdowns, over 4,600 passing yards, ultimately finishing as the QB7 in fantasy while also securing another Super Bowl in the process. Tom Brady is going to be receiving zero doubt for me this season, which is going to be increasing the safety of Mike Evans because it's very likely Mike Evans is going to get the most consistent production from the quarterback position he's received his entire career. With that said though, one thing we also have to consider is that the target totals for Mike Evans did drop off. Despite appearing in 16 full games, Mike Evans saw a total of 109 targets, 9 fewer than his previous career low, but he still was able to squeak into the 1,000-yard club with 1,006 yards, but where he made up most of his production was in the touchdown department where he scored 13. Most people would see that number, 13 touchdowns, and see 106 targets. Clearly, for most players, having over a 10% touchdown conversion rate is something that we would just see as unsustainable, but this is Mike Evans we're talking about. 6'5", 231 pounds. Highlights for Mike Evans, they don't really come down to his game-breaking speed, more about his game-breaking size where he towers over defenders, which is one of the best skill sets you can bring into the red zone. On top of that, we know Tom Brady throughout his lengthy career, he's consistently targeted these bigger tight end size players. That's exactly what Mike Evans is. So essentially, Mike Evans is filling what would be a Rob Gronkowski role, and when looking at the targets to touchdown ratio, it's easy to see how Mike Evans could possibly repeat this type of production. 13 touchdowns for Mike Evans may be a career high for him in one season, but we still can't forget that Mike Evans has also had 2 seasons with 12 receiving touchdowns, one of them coming in a 15-game played season, and with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers losing some wide receivers from last season, including Antonio Brown, Mike Evans may be in line for an even higher target market share this season, bringing in some upside that we didn't have last year. One thing to keep in mind though is that Mike Evans, when it comes to his week-to-week production, he is a player that's more feast or famine, definitely a player better built for a best ball format. If you guys are interested in dabbling into best ball, definitely do it at Underdog Fantasy, a proud partner with FFA this season. And if you want to secure a $25 credit for a deposit bonus, use our promo code FFA at checkout and do yourself a favor by grabbing some shares of Mike Evans in the process. Alright guys, we're moving into the next player on our safest wide receivers to target list, and this one may be a bit more surprising because this player did garner a injury-prone narrative in the earlier portions of his career, and I'm of course talking about Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers. It's pretty crazy to think about how many different varying levels of skill set there are in the NFL, especially at the wide receiver position. You have many sizes, many body shapes, many skill sets, and there's no doubt that Keenan Allen is one of the more unique wide receivers in the entire league. This of course falls largely on the back of how he compiles his production. Keenan Allen never a really big touchdown guy. In fact, 2020 was the season Keenan Allen tied his career high in receiving touchdowns. Definitely a good sign with a new quarterback, Justin Herbert, but even with him tying his career high, that was still only a total of 8 touchdowns. We talked about Mike Evans, who has now had 3 seasons over 12. Evans accomplishing that goal with just over 100 targets. Then looking at a player like Keenan Allen, who has seen no fewer than 136 targets across the last 4 seasons. It's just an excellent example of the varying skill sets in the NFL. Keenan Allen likely to repeat his high target volume totals, and while he may not be able to match the upside of Mike Evans putting up 4 touchdowns in one game along with 100 plus receiving yards, Keenan Allen is going to be putting up games with 15 plus receptions, and in any half PPR or full PPR league, excluding receiving yards and touchdowns, the floor for the receptions alone is massive. On draft day though, we all do have our personal preferences, some of us targeting that upside to be able to compete with some of the higher scoring teams, but the way that I look at it, some of these lower scoring games where this player is only putting up 5-8 points, if I'm relying on this player to be my wide receiver 1, they're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting, and they're going to have to do it each and every week. Keenan Allen, exactly that type of player on an offense that's certainly ascending with very little competition for targets outside of Allen. Hunter Henry now out of town, likely leading to more red zone production. Mike Williams also being one of the only other receivers being drafted out of the LA Chargers. And with the change of quarterback going from Phillip Rivers to Justin Herbert, not only proving to be a lateral movement from a volume standpoint, and similarly to the concerns with Mike Evans last season bringing in Tom Brady to lead the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, there were some risk factors associated with Phillip Rivers leaving. All concerns, though, completely put to rest. Justin Herbert had a record-breaking rookie season. This does mean that Keenan Allen, a player typically known for his safety when it comes to week-to-week consistency, may also have a chance for bringing in additional upside this season. And while no, I'm not expecting him to personally change as a player, I do think that this team will need to rely on him more with some of the pieces leaving last season. On top of the natural progression we typically see from quarterbacks from year 1 to year 2, think Jared Goff, think Carson Wentz, and while neither of those quarterbacks are on the same roster that drafted them, not quite the storybook ending, but when comparing the production they both saw in their rookie seasons to what they both showed in their sophomore seasons, this is right in line with the type of uptick in production we could possibly get from Justin Herbert. The best part is that we really don't need him to improve. In fact, Justin Herbert could regress, and Keenan Allen could still outperform what he did last season. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that this is not really a player I'm targeting in standard scoring formats. 900 plus receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. Those really just aren't the numbers that are going to cut it in a standard league. But at the same time, I don't know anyone playing in standard scoring formats anymore. In PPR, though, Keenan Allen finished as the 14th best wide receiver. And even if I were to have to pay a top 12 price tag for Keenan Allen, I'm completely fine with it even if he finishes outside of the top 12 because I really value that week-to-week consistency. Sometimes when players are putting up 50 plus points in any given week, oftentimes those points aren't even necessary, blowing out your opponent by so many, while other weeks you're losing by a mere 3 or 4 points, and a player like Keenan Allen is exactly what could have saved you from taking an L that week. Whether you end up drafting Keenan Allen or not, I still recommend you draft a player with a similar skill set, putting up that weekly consistent production. Examples of these types of players would be someone like Robert Woods. These are the perfect types of players to insert in your wide receiver 2 slot, allowing you to lean on those higher upside players like Mike Evans while also mitigating those bust games. Roster construction, we'll leave that topic for another video though. Let's hop into our final player on this list, easily one of the safest wide receivers to be drafted in the earlier rounds. And I want to throw you guys a bit of a curveball. So the final player we have on this list is going to be Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. We had an upside player with Mike Evans tied in with a safe player like Keenan Allen. So how fitting that we round out this list with a player that's virtually the best of both worlds, who may not even be drafted inside the top 12 at the wide receiver position. Terry McLaurin throughout his first 2 NFL seasons has made a major impact for this offense, even proving to be one of the better wide receivers in the league immediately out of the gate. In his first 3 NFL games, Terry McLaurin scored no fewer than 17.2 fantasy points, even going over 23 in one of those contests. But no, he wasn't a 3-week wonder. These were the types of performances we got used to in the rookie season for Terry McLaurin, which did give us a lot of hope for his fantasy production for the 2020 season. There were some massive concerns though, mainly with this offense, the quarterback position, and while thankfully we don't have to worry about Dwayne Haskins being the quarterback, this is still a team that's going to heavily rely on their defense. It's also a team that did invest draft capital into the running back position, and quite frankly, the Washington football team is built a bit differently than most teams in the NFL. They're not going to need to put up 35 plus points to beat their opponent. No, this isn't the Atlanta Falcons, it's the Washington football team, a team more likely to put up 10 points than 40, and with the new addition of Curtis Samuel likely going to soak up some more targets in the pass game as well. Previously, Terry McLaurin had no competition for targets. This leaves many people a bit concerned with the safety of Terry McLaurin for this upcoming season. For those reasons, I specifically wanted to add Terry McLaurin to this list. I'm seeing a lot of people bash Terry McLaurin for the fact that now he has more competition for targets and that the offense didn't perform well last season. Well, think about it, guys. There's more competition for targets because they're adding more offensive weapons to help this team move the ball more effectively. So anybody bashing Terry McLaurin for them adding more weapons, but also bashing them for having a bad offense last season is basically saying you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But what I see is a team that knows how to play to their strengths. I will also stick my neck out and say that this team has been a bit more well-ran. Play selection, closing out games, these were all areas that we saw improvement down the stretch from Ron Rivera. I can say with complete confidence that this team will be bringing in a better package as a whole than they did last season. I'm super high on Antonio Gibson, obviously high on Terry McLaurin. I'll likely be targeting Curtis Samuel at the wide receiver 45 in nearly every league. And while some people may call that crazy because it's on the Washington football team, I think the addition of Curtis Samuel is the perfect fit, and Antonio Gibson is exactly the type of running back to lock down that position, a position that has been very injury riddled for this Washington football team backfield for several years now. Having a consistent rusher performing out of the backfield will open up more opportunities in the passing game. Curtis Samuel as the second option in this offense is light years better than their second option they had last season. And the best part about it is that Curtis Samuel and his skill set has virtually no overlap with Terry McLaurin. In fact, Curtis Samuel is the type of player that can be lined up in any area of the field. And as we know, this has a strong tendency to throw off NFL defenses, leading to big plays. Big plays is definitely what I forecast for Terry McLaurin this upcoming season. I'm projecting him to have his best season yet, and while we are going to have to pay up a bit more than what we had from last season's production in order to land him, McLaurin of course finishing as the wide receiver 20 last year, now being drafted at around the wide receiver 15, so of course you're going to have to pay a premium, but I'm here to tell you that that premium is worth the price tag. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.